I wake up at 5:40 every morning, even though there is nowhere I need to be. The kettle goes on first. Stainless steel. A dent on the side from when Margaret dropped it in 2016, 3 months before she died, back when dropping things was still something we laughed about. I grind the coffee by hand. Burr grinder. Too loud, my son once said. Too old-fashioned. I like hearing the beans crack. It reminds me that something is still working the way it's supposed to. Breakfast is always the same. One slice of rye, toasted dark, butter measured with the edge of a knife. No jam. Jam is a weekend indulgence, and I haven't respected weekends since I retired. I sit at the small kitchen table facing the window. The plant on the sill is fake. I killed the real one during the first winter alone and decided that was enough loss for one household. At 6:10, I open the ledger. Not a metaphor, an actual ledger. Black cover. Thick paper. My handwriting's slow, but legible. The bank app is faster, but the ledger makes me honest. Numbers behave differently when you have to write them down yourself. $480,000. That's a figure I keep circling in pencil, as if it might drift away during the night. My son's business loan. I remember the day it stopped being hypothetical. March 12, 2019, Tuesday. Rain that soaked through my coat because I forgot to zip it properly. Daniel sat across from me at Romano's Cafe, tapping his phone against the table like it owed him money. It's not a loan, he said. It's more like backing. Backing. A word that sounds supportive without meaning anything. He had spreadsheets, projections, a logo mock-up. His espresso cost $6.75, which he didn't finish. I just need someone solid on paper, he said. The bank needs reassurance. I was solid on paper. 42 years at the same utility company. Pension. No debt. A paid-off townhouse that still smelled faintly of Margaret's lavender soap. How much? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. That should have been my first warning. For 80, he said eventually. Total exposure. But it's temporary. Temporary has always been my favorite lie. I raised a child on it. Temporary over time. Temporary sacrifice. Temporary stress. Margaret used to say, nothing temporary ever leaves quietly. The money didn't move all at once. That's how it stays polite. $120,000 as a personal guarantee. $200,000 secured against my property. $160,000 routed through an investment vehicle Daniel assured me was basically dormant. Dormant like a bear. The papers were thick, the font small. Daniel stood behind me while I signed, correcting my grip on the pen like I was a child learning cursive. Dad, relax, he laughed. You're not buying a timeshare. I laughed too. I wanted him to feel safe. That was 4 years ago. Now my mornings are quieter. The toaster clicks. The radiator ticks. The old laptop hums like it's tired of my questions. I check the account not because I expect change, but because I've learned disappointment prefers surprise. At 7:03, my phone buzzes. Daniel can't talk this week. Big pitch. Don't stress, okay? I stare at the message longer than necessary. My thumb hovers. I type again. Just wanted to check in. 3 dots appear. Disappear. Appear again. Everything's under control, he writes. Also, maybe don't mention the loan if you talk to anyone. It's not a great look. Not a great look. I think of the way he said it last month at my niece's birthday dinner. Loud enough for the table to hear. Casual. Dad. You don't have to tell everyone you're involved. It's kind of embarrassing. Embarrassing. I had worn my good sweater. The one Margaret bought me the winter before chemo. There was gravy on the cuff. I hadn't noticed until he pointed it out. After breakfast, I washed the cup and dried immediately. I hate water spots. Order is the last kindness I can still afford myself. At 9:00, I put on my jacket and walk 3 blocks to the mailbox, even though the mail carrier comes at noon. Habit, movement, proof of life. When I come back, there's an envelope slid under the door. No stamp, no return address. Inside a printed agenda. Board review, preliminary risk assessment. Subject, D. Harlan Enterprises. Exposure, $480,000. The paper is warm, like it's been waiting. I sit down slowly. For the first time in years, I don't open the ledger. I already know the number. and I already know what I'm going to do with it. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. I didn't call Daniel that day. That alone told me something had shifted. For years, my reflex had been to smooth things over before they developed edges. Ask gently. Wait patiently. Trust the explanation that arrived late and half-formed. But the envelope under my door had weight. Not physical, paper is still paper, but procedural, intentional. Someone had decided to look. I made soup instead. Chicken thighs, carrots cut too thick. Celery, I forgot I'd bought. The stove flame was uneven, blue with a yellow lick on the right side. I'd meant to have it serviced. I stirred slowly, the wooden spoon worn thin at the handle. Margaret hated soup that tried too hard. If it needs more than salt and thyme, you've already lost, she used to say. At the kitchen table, between sips, I laid out documents. Old habit. Spread things flat so they couldn't hide behind each other. Loan agreements. Addenda. Amendments I didn't remember agreeing to, but recognized my signature on anyway. Slanted, a little shakier each year. Pages where my name appeared not as guarantor, but as interested party. A phrase that sounded flattering until you learned what allowed. By noon, the soup was gone and the room smelled like boiled honesty. I opened my laptop and logged into the account Daniel had insisted was mostly symbolic. The investment vehicle. The dormant bear. It wasn't dormant. 3 outgoing transfers over 18 months. All under $50,000. Clever. Amounts that didn't trigger alerts. Just raised eyebrows if you bothered to look. $47,500. Operational restructuring. $49,200. Consulting services. $46,800. Bridge expense allocation. Bridge to where? I pulled my reading glasses from the drawer. The left lens was scratched. Daniel had dropped them once and said, "You should really get new ones, Dad. These make you look frail." The scratch didn't move. The numbers did. The consulting firm had a name I didn't recognize. A quick search led to a website built on stock photos and confidence. One address. Same suite number as Daniel's office. I closed the laptop and sat very still. There's a sound a house makes when it realizes it's been lied to. Not dramatic, just a settling. Wood contracting. Pipes shifting. Like it's adjusting its expectations. At 2:14 p.m., my phone rang. "Dad," Daniel said, breathless. "I heard you got something in the mail." I didn't ask how he knew. "It was just a preliminary notice," he continued quickly. "Routine. Nothing to worry about." "Who sent it?" I asked. A pause. Papers rustling. The practiced sound of someone buying time. "Probably the fund," he said. "They over-communicate. It's annoying, honestly." "I didn't know there was a board," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "There isn't really. I mean, there is, but it's not formal." "Daniel," I said, gently, "how many people answer questions about my money?" A sigh. Irritation bleeding through now. "Dad, this is exactly why I didn't want you involved at this level. It complicates things. You're not used to how business works." I looked at the clock, point 2:17. "I worked in utilities," I said. "Power generation, load balancing, risk distribution. Things fail when people pretend they won't." "That's not the same," he snapped. "This is dynamic, agile, agile. Another word that bends easily." "I want to break down," I said. "In writing." "You're overreacting." "I want to break down," I repeated. Silence stretched thin enough to tear. "Look," he said finally, voice colder. "If you're uncomfortable, we can talk about unwinding your position later. But right now, I need stability. Investors don't like panic." "I'm not panicking," I said. "I'm reading." He laughed once. Sharp. "See? That tone. This is why I didn't bring you to the launch event. You make people nervous." The launch event. I hadn't known there was one. After the call, I went for a walk without my jacket. The air was sharper than I expected. My knees complained at the corner, the one with the cracked pavement. Someone had taped over the crack with yellow paint. A warning disguised as decoration. At the park bench, I sat and watched a man teach his daughter to ride a bike. He ran beside her, hand hovering near the seat, not touching, letting her believe she was doing it alone. When she wobbled, he caught her anyway. Back home, I found another email. Request for documentation. Clarification of beneficial ownership. They were asking the wrong people. I pulled the ledger back toward me and turned to a fresh page. The paper resisted, as if it knew. I wrote the date, slowly, carefully. Then I wrote the number one more time. $480,000. This time I didn't circle it. I underlined it, hard. The public part of it happened on a Thursday. Of course it did. Thursdays are for things that want to look accidental. Daniel had invited me to lunch. Not asked, invited. A calendar link, even noon. A place downtown with concrete floors and menus printed on recycled paper thick enough to imply ethics. Thought it would be good to talk face to face. The message said, clear the air. The air, I would learn, was already spoken for. I arrived 10 minutes early. Old reflex. The hostess looked at me like I might tip in advice instead of money. I sat at a small table near the window, back straight, hands folded. The chair was uncomfortable in a way that suggested intention. Daniel arrived late, wearing a jacket I didn't recognize and the smile he uses when he's about to be generous with someone else's patience. "Dad," he said, leaning in for a half hug that missed my shoulder. "Thanks for coming." He didn't sit immediately. Instead, he scanned the room, nodding to someone behind me. "Hey." Later, he called out. I turned. 2 men and a woman at the bar. Lanyards. Identical posture. They watched us with mild interest, like you watch a demo unit. "Friends?" I asked. "Colleagues," he said, finally sitting. "Potential partners." A waiter appeared. Daniel ordered sparkling water with citrus. I ordered coffee. The waiter hesitated, as if I'd broken a rule. So Daniel said, folding his hands, "We need to align." There it was, the corporate plural, the we that doesn't include you. "I received a request for clarification," I said, "regarding beneficial ownership." Daniel exhaled through his nose, a controlled release. "Dad," he said gently, loudly enough for the bar to hear. "This is exactly the kind of thing I was hoping we could avoid." The woman at the bar glanced over. "Avoid?" I asked, making it a thing. He smiled. "You know how it looks. An older investor getting anxious. People assume things." "Like what?" "Like you don't understand the structure." I stirred my coffee. The spoon hit the mug too hard. A small, sharp sound. It felt good. "I understand," I said, "that my name is attached to transfers I didn't authorize." His jaw tightened. "They were within scope." "They were within access," I corrected. "Those are different." He leaned back, crossing his arms. The jacket creased expensively. "Dad," he said, voice lowering now, "you have to trust me on this. You're not in the room where decisions get made." I looked at him, really looked. The haircut that cost more than my monthly utilities. The watch knew. The faint impatience behind his eyes, like I was a task he'd already completed. "I was in the room," I said quietly, "when the money left." One of the men from the bar drifted closer. Not close enough to join us. Close enough to listen. Daniel noticed. His voice shifted again. Brighter. "Public. Let's not do this here," he said. "You're upsetting people." "I'm having lunch," I said. "You invited me." "Yes," but he stopped himself. Smiled again. "Look, I didn't mean embarrassing. I meant sensitive. The optics matter." "Optics," I repeated. "You tell people you're backing the company," he continued. "And suddenly they think I needed help, that I couldn't do it on my own." The words landed cleanly. Practiced. "I did help," I said. "Yes," he said quickly. "And we're grateful. Truly. But gratitude doesn't mean visibility." The woman at the bar laughed at something. The sound was sharp, dismissive. Daniel glanced at her, then back at me. "You should enjoy retirement," he said. "Travel. Garden. This," he gestured vaguely at the table. "This level of involvement doesn't suit you anymore." I felt something tight behind my eyes. Not tears. Focus. "It suits my money," I said. His face flushed. "See," he snapped. This is what I mean. You're making it about control." "It is about control." The sentence sat between us like a dropped plate. "You're 71, he said too quickly. Too loud. People notice that." The man from the bar cleared his throat. The woman looked away. "I noticed that," I said. "Every morning." Daniel leaned forward now, voice low, urgent. "If you push this," he said, "you could damage the company. My reputation." Everything I built. With my backing, I said. Yes, he said. And I'm asking you to step back. Quietly. I finished my cough. It tasted burned. Daniel, I said, do you remember when you were 10 and crashed a car in the mailbox? He blinked. What? You cried, I continued. Not because you were hurt. Because you thought you'd ruined something permanent. That's not relevant. It is, I said, because we fixed the mailbox. But you never apologized. You learned something else instead. He stood abruptly. I don't have time for this, he said. I really hoped you'd be reasonable. The word reasonable hung there misused. He dropped a bill on the table. Too much. A performance. Please, he added, turning back once, voice tight. Don't call the fund again. You're embarrassing me. Then he walked back to the bar. The lanyards turned toward him, toward the future. I sat alone. At home that evening, my phone rang once. Unknown number. Mr. Harlan? A woman asked. Professional. Calm. Yes. This is Elaine Porter, she said. Independent Review Counsel. I believe we should speak. I looked at the ledger on the table. Open. Waiting. Yes, I said. I believe we should. For the first time in a long while, the house didn't settle. It listened. Elaine Porter did not sound like someone who wasted words. We spoke the next morning at 8:00 a.m. sharp. Not 7:58. Not sometime before 9. 8. The kind of precision that suggests respect for boundaries and contempt for improvisation. Mr. Harlan, she said, before we begin, I need to clarify something. Are you looking for reassurance or accuracy? Accuracy, I said. The answer surprised me with how easily it came. Good, she replied. Then we'll get along. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't offer sympathy. She asked for documents. All of them. I spent the day turning my home into a temporary archive. Dining table cleared. Sideboard emptied. Margaret's placemats stacked carefully and set aside, as if they might object to what was coming. There's a particular humiliation in realizing you've been a footnote in your own finances. I laid out the contracts first, then the correspondence. Emails printed because screens encourage skimming, and skimming is how this started. I added bank statements, not summaries, statements, the kind that show timestamps and routing numbers and quiet intent. Elaine arrived at noon. No small talk. She placed her bag by the door like she planned to leave again, which I appreciated. She wore flat shoes, sensible ones, the kind Margaret used to favor when she had something to prove. We sat across from each other. No coffee, no tea. She read without expression. When she spoke, it was surgical. This clause, she said, tapping a page with her pen, was not in the original agreement. I nodded. I don't remember approving it. You didn't, she said. You initialed an addendum that referenced it indirectly. That's how it was done. How many times? I asked. She flipped pages. At least 4. And the transfers? Structured to avoid escalation protocols, she said. Not illegal, but intentional. Intentional is a dangerous word. It implies planning. Planning implies choice. Am I exposed? I asked. Yes, she said, but not the way you think. She turned the ledger toward herself, glanced at my handwriting. You've been treated as passive capital, she continued, but legally you retain leverage, more than they're accounting for. I noticed she didn't say your son. What happens next? I asked. That depends on how visible you're willing to be. I thought of Daniel's voice. Optics matter. I'm done hiding, I said. Elaine nodded once. Just once. That afternoon we called the fund. Not Daniel. Not his colleagues. The fund. Elaine did the talking. I listened. Learned the difference between friendly inquiry and formal concern. Learned how tone can open doors that shouting only dents. By the end of the call, there was silence on the other end. The good kind. The kind where people are recalculating. At 4:37 p.m., an email arrived. Notice of temporary review status. No blame. No accusations. Just motion. Daniel called 10 minutes later. I let it ring. Then again. Then a message. What did you do? I waited. Finished washing the dishes. Dried them. Put them away. When I finally answered, I didn't apologize. You told them, he said. No greeting. No pretense now. I answer questions, I said. You had no right. I had every right. You're jeopardizing everything, he said. deals, people's jobs. You should have thought of that before you spent my money like rehearsal cash. There it was, the first crack. You don't understand how this works, he snapped. I understand exactly how it worked, I said. That's the problem. Silence, then softer. Why are you doing this? The question sounded almost sincere. I looked around the kitchen. The clock Margaret bought me when I retired. The chair with the loose leg I'd been meaning to fix. The ledger, still open, patient as ever. Because you stopped seeing me, I said, and started using me. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It's accurate. He hung up. That evening, Elaine sent a list. Requested materials for full review. It was thorough, brutal. Dates, explanations, proof. Daniel would not enjoy it. I slept better than I had in months. Not because I expected victory. Because I finally knew where I stood. The next week unfolded quietly. That's how real pressure works. No shouting. Just requests that must be answered. Daniel tried again. This time in person. He showed up unannounced on Saturday morning, standing on my porch like a memory he didn't want to revisit. You blindsided me, he said. You blindsided yourself, I replied. He looked older, or maybe just smaller. Withdraw the review, he said. We can restructure. Privately. No, you're my father. Yes, I said, which is why I'm teaching you something you missed. He laughed sharp and hollow. You think this is a lesson? I think this is due diligence, I said. He stared at me, waiting for something softer, something familiar. It didn't come. When he left, he didn't slam the door. He just paused at the threshold, unsure which version of me he'd be speaking to next time. Neither of us said goodbye. That night, I closed the ledger for the first time in weeks. Not because the numbers were resolved, but because they were finally being respected. The letter arrived on a Monday, not certified, not dramatic. Plain white envelope, folded cleanly. My name printed instead of written. The kind of envelope that doesn't ask for permission because it already has it. I brought it inside and left it unopened on the hall table while I took off my shoes. Margaret used to tease me about that, how I refused to read anything important while still standing. Sit first, she'd say. Bad news respects furniture. I sat. The letter was heavier than paper should be. Not because of pages, there were only 2, but because of what it carried with it. Notice of formal review and conditional suspension. Exposure. $480,000. Elaine had warned me it would be worded this way. Neutral. Procedural. No villains. No victims. Just facts lining up like dominoes that hadn't fallen yet. The review was now official. All disbursements paused. All representations under scrutiny. All guarantors notified. Guarantors. Plural. Daniel called within minutes. This time I answered. Tell him to stop, he said. No anger now. No condescension. Just urgency stripped of dignity. I don't control them, I said. That's the point. You can fix this, he insisted. One call. You always like being the reasonable one. I closed my eyes. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old books. I was reasonable, I said. For 4 years. They're asking for explanations I can't give, he said. They're pulling contracts from before we even pivoted. You should explain them anyway. That's not how startups work, he snapped. Then caught himself. Dad, please. This affects people. So did your decisions, I said. Just fewer of them could complain. Silence stretched again, but this time it was fragile. They think I misled them, he said finally. Did you? He didn't answer. On Wednesday, Elaine came back. She brought a second chair and a thicker folder. This one read, The fund is questions, she said, and they're not subtle. She slid a document across the table. Request for personal clarification, D. Harlan. Not an invitation. A summons wearing polite clothes. They want a meeting, she continued. With you present. With me, I repeated. Yes, she said. Your involvement is now relevant. The meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. Video conference. 8 participants. Cameras on. Daniel did not look at me when the call began. He looked thinner. His office behind him was immaculate, staged. The logo positioned just so. The fund's chair spoke first. Calm, curious. Mr. Harlan, he said, nodding toward Daniel, we've reviewed the materials. There are discrepancies. Daniel nodded along, as if this were expected. Then the chair turned to me. "And you," he said, "have been notably patient." I said nothing. "We're trying to understand," the chair continued, "how funds allocated for operational growth were routed through entities without disclosure." Daniel leaned forward. "They were temporary," he said. "Bridging arrangements." "Bridging to what?" someone asked. Daniel's mouth opened, closed. Elaine spoke. "The entities in question share an address with a primary business," she said, "and have no independent staff." A pause. The chair glanced at his notes. "And the personal guarantee," he added, "was represented as limited." "It was," Daniel said quickly. "It was not," Elaine corrected. "It was amended without explicit acknowledgement." All eyes shifted. Daniel finally looked at me. For a moment, I saw something close to fear. "Dad," he said, turning slightly, "you know I never meant." I raised my hand. Small gesture. "Enough. This is not a family discussion," I said. My voice sounded older than I felt. "Please proceed." The chair nodded almost gratefully. By the end of the call, nothing had been decided, which meant everything had. That evening, another letter arrived. This one addressed to Daniel. I saw it later, when he forwarded it to me in a panic. Notice of conditional default review. Pending clarification of material misrepresentation. He showed up at my door the next morning, not in a jacket this time, just a shirt, wrinkled, eyes red, either from lack of sleep or too much of something else. "You're enjoying this," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm enduring it." "They might pull the line entirely," he said. "Do you understand what that means?" "Yes," I said. "It means consequences." He laughed bitterly. "You sound like a lawyer." "I sound like someone who reads." He paced the living room, stopping in front of Margaret's photograph. "She would hate this," he said. "She would hate what you did." I replied, "Don't confuse the two." He turned back to me, anger flaring again. "All this," he said, gesturing wildly, "because I asked you not to talk about the loan?" "No," I said, "because you treated me like background noise." The words landed hard. He slumped into the chair opposite me. The loose leg creaked. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. I thought for a moment. "I want the truth," I said. "In writing. I want accountability. And I want my name off anything that isn't honest." He nodded slowly, defeated now. "I don't know if I can give you that," he said. "Then the review continues," I replied. After he left, I stood alone in the living room. The house felt steadier now, as if it approved. The letter lay on the table, final line underlined by someone who believed in process. Further action pending full disclosure. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel small. I felt exact. And that, I was learning, was much harder to ignore. The noise peaked on a Wednesday and then, almost politely, stepped aside. That's how consequences usually arrive. Not with sirens, but with calendars. Daniel stopped calling after the third unanswered message. Elaine sent fewer emails, but the ones she did send were denser. Paragraphs tightened. Language sharpened. Words like exposure gave way to findings. The review did not explode. It condensed. I learned that there is a particular cruelty in accuracy. It doesn't rage. It doesn't moralize. It just keeps returning with receipts. The fund issued its conclusions in stages. First, the easy part. Certain representations were deemed overly optimistic. That was the phrase. I appreciated its restraint. Optimism, after all, is only dangerous when it's contagious. Second, the structural part. Related party transactions had not been disclosed in full. Correctable, but costly. Trust, once itemized, becomes expensive. Third, the part Daniel could not outrun. My personal guarantee would be severed. That clause arrived on a Friday afternoon, tucked into a longer document, understated like mercy. Release of guarantor, effective upon restructuring. Elaine called to confirm. "You're clear," she said. "Your exposure ends here." I thanked her, not effusively. She wasn't someone who liked gratitude to linger. "And Daniel?" I asked. There was a pause, the professional kind. "Daniel retains operational control," she said, "but under supervision." Supervision. Another word that sounds gentler than it feels. He came by one last time after that. Didn't knock. Just stood on the porch until I opened the door, as if he'd forgotten the choreography of arrival. He looked emptied, not ruined, not destroyed, just reduced to scale. They're staying in, he said without greeting. But they own more now. That's how leverage works, I said. He nodded. Saturday. Didn't pace this time. I had to sell the car, he added, almost to himself. I thought of a watch, the jacket, the espresso he never finished. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it not for the loss, but for the lesson's timing. He studied his hands. They asked why I didn't disclose everything, he said. I told them I thought it would scare you. And I asked, and they asked why that mattered. The silence that followed was different. Not brittle, just tired. I didn't think you'd actually read, he said finally. I thought you trusted me. I did, I said. That's why I read. He looked up at that. Really looked. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted. I stood and went to the sideboard, poured 2 glasses of water, set one in front of him. You don't fix it, I said. You live with it. That's how it sticks. He left shortly after. No argument. No apology either. Just a nod at the door. Like we were concluding a transaction neither of us wanted, but both understood. The house was quiet again. Not empty. Quiet. I returned the dining table to its old shape. Papers filed. Placements back where Margaret liked them. The ledger went into the drawer. Not closed, just resting. Weeks passed. I noticed small things. My shoulders dropped. The phone stayed silent longer without feeling accusatory. I stopped rehearsing conversations that never came. One afternoon, I took the bus downtown and walked past a cafe where Daniel once talked about backing and optics. The chairs were different now. The menu changed. The same price for coffee. At the park, the man and his daughter were gone. A new child wobbled on a bike, this time with no one running beside her. She fell, got up, tried again. That evening, I received one final message from Elaine. Matter concluded. No further action required. That was it. No congratulations. No moral. I printed it anyway and slid it into the back of the ledger. Not as proof, as punctuation. Daniel didn't call after that. Months later, I heard from a cousin that his company was still operating. Smaller, quieter, more careful. I felt no satisfaction in that. Just relief that the story hadn't ended in smoke. On the anniversary of Margaret's death, I cleaned the kitchen thoroughly, even the top of the cabinets, especially the kettle. I sat at the table with a slice of rye and measure butter and thought about how easily love turns into assumption, how often silence gets mistaken for consent. The money came back to me in a way that felt symbolic rather than financial. A refund of attention, of self-respect. I no longer wake up at 5:40 every morning, sometimes at S6:10, sometimes later. There is nowhere I need to be, but there is something I am no longer willing to be. Invisible, that it turns out was the real debt, and it has finally been paid. The last thing I did was remove my name, not ceremonially, not with witnesses. Just a quiet visit to the records office on a Tuesday morning when the clerk looked bored and the printer jammed twice. I signed where I was told, initialed where it mattered, and watched my signature detach itself from obligations that had never learned my face. When it was done, the clerk slid the folder back to me. All set, Mr. Harlan, she said. You're no longer listed. Listed, as if I'd been an ingredient. Outside, the air was sharp with late autumn. Leaves scraped along the sidewalk like receipts that refused to be thrown away. I stood there longer than necessary, hands in my pockets, feeling the unfamiliar lightness of not being tied to something that required explanation. I didn't tell Daniel, not out of spite, out of accuracy. The separation no longer needed narration. Weeks later, a check arrived. Not a refund, not compensation. A return of unused funds from a restructured reserve account. Money that had been sitting idle, technically mine, functionally ignored. $32,400. I stared at the number for a long time. It wasn't large enough to feel victorious. It wasn't small enough to dismiss. It was exact. A remainder, proof that even when things go wrong, not everything disappears. I deposited it and didn't touch it. Some money exists only to remind you that you survived. The holidays came quietly. No invitation. No exclusion either. Just silence where expectations used to be. I cooked for myself. Soup again. This time with too much salt. I ate it anyway. On Christmas morning, I took a walk before sunrise. The neighborhood was asleep, houses glowing faintly like appliances left on standby. I passed windows filled with trees and wrapping paper and felt no bitterness, only distance. Distance, I was learning, is not the same as loss. In January, Daniel emailed. Not a call, not a visit. An email with no subject line. They want me to present next quarter, he wrote. Smaller room, fewer promises. I read it twice. Then I replied with one sentence. Say only what you can prove. He did not respond. Spring arrived the way it always does. Slowly, then all at once. I replaced the fake plant with a real one. Basil. It survived. I fixed a loose leg on the chair. It had been a simple repair. One screw tightened, one shim-added. I wondered how long it had wobbled because I'd been too distracted to notice. The ledger stayed in the drawer, not hidden, retired. One afternoon, I ran into an old colleague from a utility company at the grocery store. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe just more honest. Retirement treating you okay? He asked. Yes, I said. Better now. He nodded. The way men do when they understand without asking. I never heard the full story of what happened at Daniel's company after that. Pieces came through family channels, distorted by loyalty and embarrassment. There was talk of discipline, of oversight, of learning curves. No one mentioned my name. That was fine. In June, Elaine sent a final note, not professional this time. Just a line at the bottom of an otherwise empty email. For what it's worth, she wrote, you handled this cleanly. Cleanly. I thought about that word for a long time. Clean is not painless. It just doesn't leave residue. On my birthday, I bought myself a new kettle. The old one still worked, dent and all, but I wanted something unmarked. A fresh surface. No, history. I kept the old one too. That evening, as the sun dropped low enough to catch the dust in the air, I took out Margaret's photograph and set it on the table. Not to talk to her, just to let her be there. I didn't raise him wrong, I said out loud. I just stopped correcting him. The house did not respond. It didn't need to. Later that night, I opened the window and listened to the city settle. Cars in the distance. Someone laughing 3 floors up. A radio playing something old and off-key. I realized then that the story people tell themselves about aging is wrong. You don't fade. You refine. You learn which signatures matter, which silences are earned, which numbers are worth circling, and which are worth striking through entirely. I went to bed without setting an alarm. In the morning, I woke. When I woke, the basil had grown another inch. And for the first time in a very long while, everything in my name was finally unmistakably my own.